At a noisy tavern, men laughed crudely about the three great beauties of the Helios Empire, mocking Rozenta for being too beautiful, as if that made him less of a man. Their laughter ended abruptly when a figure in black struck them down. The one who begged for mercy was killed all the same. It was Enoch, the quiet boy from years ago, now grown into something far darker. Life after the late emperor's funeral gave no pause. Theodore was crushed under endless documents, Rozenta likewise drowning in ducal duties, and Vivian was dragged into the whirlpool of high society until she barely had time to breathe. Letters kept them connected, but meetings grew rare. The next day, Rozenta visited Theodore, who was buried under a mountain of paperwork. She offered her help, which he gratefully accepted. Not long after, Vivian arrived, still as unruly as ever with them, jumping onto the couch, declaring she had seen Rozenta entering the palace. Theo teased her as usual, accusing her of visiting because she still liked him, and the bickering between them picked up like no time had passed. Rozenta could only smile. Despite the years, some things truly never changed. Later, returning to the Estella estate, Rozenta reflected on the novel she had once read. The story's path had already strayed so far from the original that she could no longer tell if the plot would ever play out as written. Yet one thing lingered in her mind. If she simply waited for the saintess to appear, countless lives might be put at stake. And so, with quiet determination, Rozenta left the castle that night, seeking the missing piece of the story before the future could spiral out of control. Rozenta's search soon led to whispers of a man feared across the empire, a great magician of extraordinary power. Once hailed as a prodigy, he had vanished after killing his own mentor, leaving only rumors and a trail of destruction behind. Most called him a criminal, others called him cursed, but Rozenta wasn't interested in titles. She needed him. No matter what kind of monster he had become, his strength was essential for what lay ahead. The tavern was in uproar when Rozenta entered. Patrons shouted, chairs were overturned, and at the center of the storm stood the magician called Wolf. He had just stabbed a man over a foolish bet, leaving the floor stained with blood and the room hushed in fear. To others, he was a lunatic. To Rozenta, he was the power she needed. Wolf's eyes caught hers, sharp and unsettling. Before she could speak, he named his price, 10 gold, regardless of the task. Rozenta paid without hesitation, then gave her request. He was to dispel the sandstorm blocking Tyrion and serve as her attendant in the process. When she introduced herself as Rozenta Estella, Duke of Estella, his grin stretched wider, as if her title explained everything. He opened his mouth as though to introduce himself, but Rozenta cut him off smoothly, saying she already knew he was Wolf. For a moment, silence lingered. Then Wolf only smiled, offering no correction. If he had intended another name, he buried it behind that crooked grin, letting Wolf stand. The deal was sealed. In the end, Wolf became her butler. Perhaps the uniform suited him better than an attendant's garb, because he looked every bit the part, sharp, composed, and almost too perfect for someone with his reputation. After a few days of preparation, Rozenta set out for Tyrion with Vivian and Wolf by her side. The road took them across a relentless desert, sand stretching endlessly beneath the sun. By the time they reached Tyrion, the journey had worn them down, and servants quickly guided them to their rooms. Before Rozenta could leave, Vivian tugged at her sleeve, asking if he would tie her hair later. Should she come to his room, or would he come to hers? Rozenta only smiled gently and promised to visit her room shortly. Turning to leave, she nearly jumped. Wolf was standing so close it startled her. His eyes were unreadable as ever when he told her to hurry, reminding her the banquet was about to begin. At the banquet, Rozenta offered his hand to Vivian, asking her for a dance. She agreed shyly, cheeks red as they moved across the floor. Perhaps this was why rumors had begun to swirl about a love triangle between them and Theodore, but Rozenta paid little mind. Gossip was cheap, and the moment was harmless. When the night ended, Rozenta escorted Vivian back to her room. After a soft goodnight, he turned to leave, only to nearly bump into Wolf standing silently in the hallway. Startled, Rozenta froze, but Wolf only smiled faintly. From his hand dangled a ribbon, which he extended forward with an expected smile. Without a word, he asked if Rozenta could brush his hairs as well. Rozenta hesitated when Wolf held out the ribbon, but caution told her it was better to indulge him than refuse. So, just as she had brushed Vivian's hair before the banquet, she began brushing his. Wolf, however, was not content. He demanded she style it exactly as she had done for Vivian. With a small sigh of surrender, Rozenta complied, carefully shaping his hair into the same neat style. When she finished, Wolf's satisfaction was plain. He seemed almost amused that their hairstyles now matched. Rozenta, on the other hand, was drained. She dropped onto the couch, closed her eyes, and quickly drifted into sleep. For a long moment, Wolf watched her in silence. Then, with a strange gentleness, he brushed a strand of hair from her cheek with his hand. Memories stirred within him. Once, when he was younger, Enoch's unusual sensitivity to mana had allowed him to notice something others could not. Rozenta was using magic to disguise her true self. Confused, he had asked Hiorin why everyone addressed Rozenta as Lord when she was clearly a lady. That single question was enough. Fearing the secret might be exposed, Hiorin drove him away, severing their contact entirely. Later, he had fallen into the hands of a mentor who twisted his sensitivity to magic into an experiment. Piece by piece, his mind had unraveled until he could no longer feel as normal men did. Only danger stirred his dulled heart. And yet here, watching Rozenta's sleeping face, he felt something. Not the rush of risk or the thrill of madness, but something softer, stranger. Something he did not hate. She called him Wolf, and he did not dislike it. But now, he wondered what he would feel when she finally called him by the name she had unknowingly given back to him, Enoch. He wished for that moment. He wished for her to recognize him. The next morning, Rozenta was still weary from the long night, though preparations for departure were already underway. When Vivian spotted Wolf, she immediately frowned. His hair was neatly styled, far too neat for someone like him. With a pointed look, she asked Rozenta what had happened. Embarrassed, Rozenta couldn't bring herself to reply, and Wolf gave nothing away, only smirking at her discomfort. 2 camels had been prepared for the desert crossing. A local guide from Tehran accompanied them to show the safest route. Rozenta and Wolf shared one camel, while Vivian rode the other with an attendant. The storm struck midway through their journey, sand whipping like 1,000 needles against exposed skin. Vivian could barely open her eyes, straining to see if Rozenta was all right. What she didn't realize was that Rozenta, unbothered by the storm, had dozed off peacefully, leaning against Wolf's back. When they finally reached their destination, Wolf roused her. Startled, Rozenta nearly slipped off the camel, but his arm caught her by the waist and pulled her closer before she could fall. Flustered, she thanked him, then quickly glanced toward Vivian, who was still half-blinded by the storm. Suspicious, Rozenta asked Wolf when he had cast magic on them. Calmly, he replied that it had been since she fell asleep. He hadn't wanted her rest to be disturbed. Concerned, Rozenta whispered if it was wise to let the others see him using magic. Wolf only chuckled. "I didn't block their vision," he said. "I simply strengthened the storm so they couldn't open their eyes." Rozenta frowned, reminding him that she had asked him to deal with the tornado, not to strengthen it. Wolf only smiled in response. With effortless grace, he leapt from the camel and strode into the storm. Before acting, he slipped on a mask. In that instant, a flicker of memory stirred in Rozenta's mind. Long, dark hair like polished ebony and a wolf mask. Her breath caught. Could he be Enoch? The storm raged, but Wolf's power overwhelmed it. Sand and wind bent to his will until the tornado dissolved into nothingness. The price, however, was heavy. The magic consumed so much of his strength that he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Duke Gray, their host, hurried to thank them for their aid. In gratitude, he offered a griffin to carry them back home, sparing them another exhausting journey across the desert. When they returned to Estella Castle, Rozenta instructed the butler to move Wolf into an empty room, while she personally escorted Vivian back to her home. Meanwhile, Theodore received a letter from Rozenta. It stated that everything had been settled without trouble and that they had returned safely, though exhausted. Relieved, Theodore ordered his aide to prepare a month's supply of medicine for fatigue and decided he would personally visit both Vivian and Rozenta soon. The next day, after washing up, Rozenta went to check on Wolf. A faint unease lingered in her chest. According to the plot she remembered, the female lead was supposed to be the one who gave Enoch his name. Instead, she had already given him a temporary one herself. It should be fine, she reassured herself. It was only temporary anyway. For now, Wolf had not yet recovered his magical strength, and as a result, he remained asleep, the after-effects of overexertion forcing his body into deep rest. Rozenta quietly watched him, studying the lines of his face softened in slumber. Without realizing, her lips moved. She murmured softly, almost testing the sound. "If I'm not mistaken." Her voice steadied and she called out clearly, "Enoch." The moment Rozenta whispered his name, Wolf's eyes snapped open. In a swift motion, he pulled her into his arms and pinned her beneath him on the bed, his weight and presence overwhelming. Hovering above her, his gaze sharpened. "What did you just call me?" he demanded. Rozenta, startled but steady, answered, "Your name, Enoch." His expression flickered, something unreadable caught between shock and hunger. "Say it again," he urged. When she repeated it, Rozenta finally understood. Wolf was truly Enoch, yet the way he responded to the name revealed something else. He had accepted it as his own long before, meaning the story had already strayed from its original course. While she was lost in that realization, Enoch's low voice called her back. Before she could reply, the door swung open. "Theodore," Rozenta barely managed before the crown prince's eyes fixed on the scene, Enoch atop her. His sword was out in an instant, steel gleaming at Enoch's throat. "Who are you?" Theodore's voice was sharp, furious. Enoch, utterly unfazed, met his glare and countered with equal calm. "Who are you?" Theodore's jaw tightened. "You don't know me." Enoch's smile curved, cold and indifferent. "Is there a particular reason I should?" Rozenta quickly intervened, her voice firm despite the tension. "Theodore, lower your sword. I'd like to stand up." Reluctantly, he eased back just enough for her to rise. She then turned to Enoch. "And you get off me." Enoch obeyed, but the moment Rozenta stood, Theodore immediately pulled her behind him, shielding her as though she were still in danger. "Theodore, it's not what you think," she tried to explain. "He was on top of you," he shot back coldly. "He didn't harm me in any way." "That doesn't change the fact he was." "Enough," Rozenta cut him off, her voice sharper now. "Better to end this here. If anyone were to see, they could misunderstand. Enoch, wait for me, I'll return." Without giving either man another chance to speak, she grabbed Theodore's hand and pulled him toward the sitting room. Once there, she finally asked, "How did you even end up in that chambers?" Theodore's expression faltered with guilt. "I was on my way to see you. Then I heard sounds, familiar ones. When I went to check, I saw him on top of you." Rozenta steadied her breath. "Were you alone, or was someone with you?" "My attendant was tending to the medicine I brought. I came alone," he admitted. She exhaled in relief. Good. At least no one else saw. If word got out, she would be mistaken as gay. Rozenta let out a soft sigh of relief. "Thank goodness it was you who found us." But instead of easing, her words made Theodore flinch, his expression darkening. Quickly, she clarified, "I meant someone else could have misunderstood. It might have looked like two men doing something strange." For a moment, silence hung heavy, then Theodore blinked, realization dawning. Both she and Enoch were seen as men. A short, almost awkward laugh escaped him. "Goodness, what in the world was I imagining?" Theodore asked his identity. "His name is Enoch," Rozenta replied evenly. "He's my current butler." She hesitated, wondering whether to mention his magic, but decided against it. When Theodore's eyes narrowed, sensing she had more to say, she smoothly added, "I paid him a fair price and hired him. I needed help dealing with the sandstorm." Still unconvinced, Theodore pressed, "How could someone like him be useful?" Rozenta met his gaze calmly. "I needed someone to activate the magic artifact I brought. While I held it, someone had to ignite it." That explanation seemed to ease him slightly. Though not fully satisfied, he dropped the matter with a curt nod. Sensing his doubt lingered, Rozenta offered gently, "If it helps, I'll submit you a report." At that, Theodore's mood brightened a little. "Good, I'll look forward to it." On the way back, Theodore's thoughts lingered on what he had witnessed. Enoch's presence troubled him. The man's gaze had been sharp, almost predatory, like a wild beast poised to strike. Even so, Theodore forced himself to trust Rozenta's judgment. A few days later, Enoch accepted his payment and left Estella Castle without resistance, far more easily than Rozenta had expected. She had half believed it would be difficult to send him away, but he departed without a word. Not long after, Rozenta went to the imperial palace herself to deliver her report on the sandstorm and to answer an invitation. The meal with Theodore was set in a quiet chamber, sunlight falling across the table where they shared their lunch. At one point, Theodore broke the silence. "You've no reason to meet that shady fellow again, do you?" Rozenta raised a brow. "You mean Enoch?" "Yes," he admitted without hesitation. She gave a small smile and replied, "No, I don't have any reason to see him again." That answer seemed to lift a weight from Theodore. He relaxed slightly, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Good." Rozenta informed Theodore of her plan to hold a banquet, her first duty as the new head of the duchy. He approved, and the following days were consumed by endless preparations. With no lady of the house, every detail fell on her shoulders. Once the arrangements were complete, she called Vivian to confirm everything. Only then did she finally collapse into bed, drained from the work. As she reached to remove the artifact, her breath caught. Her hand looked wrong, slender, unmistakably feminine. She rushed to the mirror. The reflection staring back was her true self, not the young lord she was meant to be. A chill ran through her. The banquet was tomorrow. If anyone saw her like this, everything would shatter. Heart racing, she tore through her belongings, searching desperately for another artifact. She needed to hide before it was too late. Finding no spare artifact, Rozenta slipped out of the castle under the cover of night and went straight to Hugo, the craftsman who had created them. She told him something felt wrong with the artifact. After examining it, Hugo frowned. "Did you meet a magician recently? I see traces on it." Rozenta looked at him in confusion, and he explained, "Magicians leave behind fragments of their magic wherever they've been. We call it a trace. Is there someone you suspect?" Her thoughts went immediately to Enoch. Hugo's artifacts had never failed her, until after she met him. "Some people are so sensitive to mana," Hugo continued, "that no disguise works on them. They see through everything." Rozenta's mood sank. So Enoch knew her identity from the start. Hugo drew the magic out of the artifact and carefully restored it. "Who is this exceptional person?" he asked. "An insane punk," she muttered bitterly. When Rozenta returned to the castle, unaware, Enoch was watching from a distance. Amused, he chuckled. She went searching for someone else, never considering him. Then, spreading his wings, he whispered, "See you soon, Duke," before vanishing into the night.